Argo CD 2.14 is out. Now, the way that we do these releases is we usually have a release candidate that comes with a blog post. This one happened back in December, is when we published the release candidate for 2.14. And so now this one is the official release. So if you haven't upgraded, definitely do that. But in terms of features, I think we won't go, because this release candidate is out, we probably won't go super in depth on this. I think in the future, when there are releases, we'll spend a little bit more time and maybe do some demos and things. For this one, there's a couple of kind of highlight features that we have. So the global sync timeout is pretty self-explanatory, but basically just a way to cap kind of long-running operations from just being stuck and being able to mark them as failure. I think that's a nice point. On the Helm side, adding the skip schema validation is useful. There's some issues sometimes when you're doing schema validation because you're dealing with offline clusters. Maybe there's these external schemas are inaccessible. And so that can create kind of some issues. And so you want to be able to skip that. Now that's a feature that's new in Helm to 3.16. So something to take advantage of. And if you're using Istio or something like that, there are other reasons to do schema validation checks or skip it. So that's a good feature. And another community feature from Demosis. And it's funny, you always read GitHub usernames and then you don't ever say them out loud. And then when you go to actually say them, you're like, oh wait, I actually have no idea how to say that. But we never address each other with GitHub usernames.
No, we shouldn't.
Mine's today was awesome. And nobody's ever like, how's it going? Today was awesome. Like they don't. It's not a thing. We've got a new sync option that Alexander M provided, which allows us to basically add a confirmation check when you go to delete resources. So when you in Argo CD, when you delete a resource, you can do it in foreground, you can do it in background. And you can also do non-cascading. Non-cascading will delete like an application, but it won't delete any of its resources. But if you're doing a foreground or a background deletion, it will delete those resources. And you might have certain resources that you want to be protected in some extra way. And so now there is an option to add a little, in fact, let's see, we're showing this right now. Actually, can we show...
Definitely.
Let me
put
my screen on.
You want to show the blog?
Yeah, I've got the blog up right now. So if you want to switch to my screen, maybe really quick. Bloop. Okay, there we go. So, yeah, we've added this. Where is it? Not this one. It shot me way down. Oh, no.
Oh, it's not this one. Yeah.
I'm skipping ahead. Here it is. Yeah, this one. So now you can add an annotation on a resource to mark it as sync options prune confirm. And if you do that, it will make it so that you have to do a user intervention to confirm the deletion of this resource. And so the application will enter a deleting state, but it will basically be stuck there until this is done. And there's new documentation that goes with this. So on this, if you're using this prune confirm annotation, then you can approve it via the CLI, the UI, or you can even add I think actually we haven't even updated that doc yet. Hang on, it'll be right. Let me look in the docs here. Because it should show, yeah. So you can also add a little annotation with a deletion approval timestamp. So if you wanted to do it programmatically, you can also do programmatic approvals of resource deletion. That's a really cool feature that opens up a lot of possibilities to do a lot of other interesting stuff. Now, ideally, like, you do have things like finalizers that work really well for this. So this is an area where sometimes people will screw up when they're working with Argo CD, because they'll decide what to. Argo CD, let me put it this way, okay, Rubitel. Argo CD always wants to do stuff the Kubernetes way. And so you should always do stuff the Kubernetes way first. And if you're not doing it the Kubernetes way, then it's going to be potentially more of a challenge. How do I take this thing off the screen for a second? I can remove it, but I just wanted to like pull it off stage. All right, that works.
Okay.
Oh yeah, pull that off. Just I know what I want to do. I just wanted to switch it to us really quick here for a second.
Oh.
Thank you. Sorry.
The Kubernetes way.
Yeah, Kubernetes has finalizers, and a finalizer is a way to delegate the shutdown process of a resource to some controller. And so if you're looking at confirm, you're like prune confirm, you're like, oh, great, I'm going to use that like for volumes or something. It's like, yeah, you could, but you probably are going to have a finalizer from your volume provider. So like if you're using like Longhorn or something, and that will make sure that all of the right operations have completed, and it's it has a life cycle that it needs to go to shut down that resource. And so ideally the confirmation is only used for things where a controller doesn't make sense, where it doesn't make sense that there'd be delegation to some other resource. Now, most applications are designed with this in mind, and the finalizers are going to be respected by Argo CD. Does that all make sense, Rubitel?
Yeah, it's a little bit complex.
Okay. Fair enough.
For a newbie like me, yeah, but we'll get there.
Yeah, for most of the time, you probably won't have to use something like this. But there are just certain cases where, for example, I know that in community meetings, we've had people bring up like, oh, we have some users who accidentally deleted stuff that were resources that were part of an application that we really don't want them to delete. And so having this in there is like, oh, okay, sure. Like I can add in a few little protections so that people can delete stuff, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, and that normally comes from the policy of the company. No, that's like part of the company, so developers won't make any mistakes there.
Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
Okay.
Another feature, and I'll bring this one back up, but and we're going to skip a couple, but faster application refreshes is a feature that was contributed. And so this is one where there was, as I recall, there was a fair bit of testing done about what was causing different slowdowns in different scenarios where the UI became slow. And in this case, there's been a couple of additional options added so you can fine tune it in addition to just changing the way that batch refresh works. So it should be faster and more reliable. So that'll be a nice feature for a lot of people to have.
Okay. Sounds good.
Any other things stick out to you with this release?
Yes, but it's more of, I have a generic question. I know that 2.11.x is now out of support.
Yep, that's right.
Is that how it normally works? We go 3 versions back, and then we support only the last 3?
Yeah, so Argo CD is always current version, and we call it N-2 because its current version is N-2, and those are the supported versions. And so we do a release once a quarter, so you get not quite a year of support for. Is that our release schedule? Is it really once a quarter? Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, 4 times a year. Yeah, once a quarter.
Yes.
Yeah, it is once a quarter. I just said it out loud, and I was like, that sounds like a lot. Now, with this release, 2.14 is going to be a little bit landmark because it's our last 2.0 release. We are now working on Argo CD version 3.0. And this will be the first time that we bump a point version since 2021, probably. So it's been a long time that we've been on Argo CD 2. Now, this is not going to be like a Java 7 versus Java 8 thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to be using Java 7 forever. Like, no. This is Argo CD 2.14 will go out of support by the time we get to Argo CD 3.2. And that'll happen probably by the end of the year, right? So with 3.0, and we'll do a whole episode about 3.0, but this is really a release that is about deprecating fully, like removing things that have been deprecated for a while, maybe bumping some API versions to make those kind of moving into like a stable, they're moving out of alpha or beta or whatever. And it's really about setting us up for the additional development that's going to happen over this next year, because there's a lot of components they're going to be coming with that. So that's going to be really cool.
Wow. One more point. There was a comment about version 2.14.0. The release manifests incorrectly, and therefore you should be using version 2.14.1.
Yep. Good point. Yeah.
Okay.
14.1.
Yes.
And we do also have, actually, let me throw back up one more thing. There is now the ability to disable server-side apply on individual resources. So Revital, for you as a new user, you probably haven't run into the server-side apply versus client-side apply stuff too much.
No.
But normally when you apply resources using Argo CD, it does it client-side. And so when you do something client-side, it changes some of the parameters of how that YAML is processed. For example, you can't send as large of files if you're applying them client side. So server side apply will allow you to do things like have larger YAML. And then when you do a client side apply, it also includes like the previous version of the YAML is included when it's sent, so that it's easier to kind of go back, I guess, and look at like the history. But when you do server-side apply, it's not. And so that allows you to that's part of what goes into giving you that larger window of resources. So most people don't think about this and it doesn't matter and they don't care. But if you were installing Prometheus, you would know that you can't even do it client-side. You have to do it server-side because the YAML is so big that it won't fit. So that's like the first reason that most people do server-side apply.
Because the size of the file?
Yeah, it's literally just because of the size of the YAML.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a nice thing to have. But server-side apply does also change some small behaviors. And I'm having a hard time thinking of one off the top of my head of what changes. But the ability to disable server-side apply on some individual resources is giving you much better fine-grained control over how different resources are applied and updated. And it can change things like validation, or I guess I'm thinking about like when you do a dry run, doing it server side versus client side, but that's not really the application here. So we'll leave that aside, but yeah, there you go.
All right. Sounds good. Those were great highlights. Again, the blog was pasted in the comments, so if you want to go through them, feel free to do so. We'll go next to security. Even though it's February 2025, I still want to highlight, in a nutshell, the work that has been done through 2024 in terms of security. 13 security patches were released and reviewed. And the team resolved 28 vulnerability reports. So that's a fantastic work in terms of security. And more details can be read in that specific article. I'll be sharing the link. And while I'll be doing that, you can talk about the new release for Argo CD image update.
Oh, actually, I was going to comment on the security thing for a second. For people that don't know, we run a bounty program on security disclosures. So if you find a vulnerability in Argo CD, and you can find this in our security policy, and you can also find our listing on HackerOne. But if you find a vulnerability and you do a responsible disclosure to us through the process outlined in our security doc, then when we verify a fix for that, you'll actually get paid. And if it's a critical vulnerability, you get paid more, and it's significant. I mean, I think a critical one is paid like, I want to say it's $1,000, but that might be wrong. So I'd have to look
thought
up the
it's
bounty.
even more. I saw that there were higher prices than that. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that we should actually do one episode about that process.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we could do that.
We should do that.
Yeah, it's and the other cool thing is that when you do that, so the way that that's funded is through the CNCF. So what happens is, not only do you get paid, but our project also gets allocated a little extra 20% of that, and we can use that to fund better testing. We also have a program to do bounties for features, and we've only done it once so far, but we've had like a feature where like, hey, this is something that we want the community to build, but nobody from the normal maintainer flow is going to be able to get to it. And so we can actually create a bounty and say, hey, here's something where let's spend some of those dollars. So it's a win-win. It's a win for the community. It's a win for the project, and it helps us make the project more sustainable. And I'm looking at a bug that was closed last year, and the bounty on it was $2,000. So there is like a significant, payout for getting these CVEs on there. And beyond that, when we publish the CVE, boom, that's your name on the reporter. That's like street cred. You can point out and be like, yeah, man, I found a vulnerability in Argo CD, and they paid me for it and everything. And because I did responsible disclosure, nobody got in trouble, and now I'm a rock star and a hero. That's awesome.
And I've earned some money, which is fantastic.
And I've earned some money for myself and for the project. So yeah, it's a win-win all around for everybody. So definitely participate in that if you haven't before. And
stay tuned for another episode.
Yeah, and we'll save it for another episode.
Specifically about that.
Yeah, okay, good idea. And then last comment on it is that our team, the Code Fresh Octopus team, was the #1 contributor of security patches for the year, which I'm very proud of, and not trying to dunk on anybody, because Michael Crenshaw leads the security response from Intuit. He's phenomenal, does a great job, and Red Hat's a huge player there. Acuity does some reviews this last year. They've done some help there. So appreciate, honestly, everybody that works on it, but do want to brag about our team a little bit being the #1. I mean, they did more patches than anybody, so happy about that, and hopefully we'll continue that this year too.
Love it. Okay, so Argo CD image updater. This one was fairly new to me. I read that it's a project available at Argo Labs.
Yeah.
You want to mention something about Argo Labs? Maybe
yeah, it's like introducing so many different things, but
yes.
So within the Argo project, there are official projects that are like, this is a CNCF project, this is governed by the CNCF, this is like governed by a set group of maintainers who are from the Argo project, and that those projects are relatively few. It's Argo CD, Argo Workflows, Argo Rollouts. There's a couple of other ones, but then we also have a GitHub organization called Argo Labs, and this is where the community can come in and create projects that are things that are supportive of, work with, interoperate with, are based on, or some have some other association with the Argo project. And it becomes like a community where you can have stuff that maybe it's not CNCF yet. Maybe it's up and down. Maybe there's, more to flesh out. You're looking for contributors, whatever it is. That's what Argo Project Labs is for. And there's a couple of very popular projects in there. Argo CD Autopilot is an Argo Lab project that we maintain. And then the other one that's probably the most popular is Argo CD Image Updater. And Image Updater is a tool that will allow you to basically say like, hey, my application 99.9% of the time, all I'm doing is updating the image. I want to have a way that just monitors, Docker Hub or Quay or whatever, looking for new versions of this image. And anytime I see one, go and update my Argo CD application to use that new image. And even has the feature of doing Git write back. So it will actually update in Git what that new image is. So you're not losing disaster recovery or anything like that when you use it. So it's a really cool project, really cool tool. We came into it, and we being CodeFresh came into it about 6 or 7 months ago, where the people that had been maintaining it just didn't have time to kind of manage releases and merge pull requests and do testing and stuff. And so our team started taking on to help out with that. I don't know if I'm going to say that that's necessarily the long-term plan, but we were able to get out. I think this is our second or third release that we helped make happen for Image Updater, which I know has been sorely wanted by the community of people that have been using this tool and relying on it. It's a really cool tool.
So 6 new features, 16 fixes, and several documentation updates.
Yeah, so there's a couple in here that I'll highlight, and I have
it here.
You got it. All right. So first off, Image Updater hasn't supported Argo CD instances that were not installed in the Argo CD. Actually, let me put it a different way. In Argo CD, for a long time, if you wanted to create an application, that was always done, that application custom resource definition was always done inside the Argo CD namespace or the installation namespace. But we also added the ability to have application custom resources in multiple namespaces. So this is something that people wanted because they were like, hey, we're using a permission model in our Kubernetes cluster where each namespace is owned by a different team. So I want them to be able to add their application custom resource definition to their own namespace, to deploy to their own namespace, and so that all their stuff is self-managed and we don't have to engage in even the Argo CD permission model because we can just use the Kubernetes permission model. Does that make sense, Rubitel?
Yes. So basically what you're saying is that now we can basically check for new image tags in applications that are out of the Argo CD namespace.
Yeah. So you might have multiple teams, each of them managing applications in a different namespace. And now with this new feature from Argo CD Image Updater, you can have those applications getting updated by Image Updater. So that's a really nice feature, especially for larger teams, enterprise teams that have needed that level of help. And that's been a blocker for a lot of teams to adopt Image Updater, is just that they took advantage of that Argo CD app in any namespace feature.
Is there a specific format about how to define namespaces? So like the parent would be Argo CD, and then how does it work?
Well, it's not about parent. It's about which namespaces get watched for application resources. So by default, the application custom resource, and we'll talk about that when we get into the demo, but that application custom resource is only being looked for in the Argo CD namespace.
Yeah.
But you can change the configuration of Argo CD to look for applications in other namespaces, and even restrict and say like, okay, any application that's been added from this namespace can only deploy to that same namespace. So you can have kind of a deeper permission set to say like, okay, this team, they own a namespace and they can deploy anything they want there, including the Argo CD applications that manage all the stuff that they're deploying. Does that make that makes sense? Okay.
Yes.
Right. So there's that one. I mentioned that Argo CD Image Updater can do Git write back. So when it updates an image, it will go and update that tag in Git if it's using customize or if it's using Helm, as long as it's part of like the values file, for example, or if it's just
Question.
using plain manifests.
What is a Git write back method? Can you?
Yeah, so it will see that an image has been updated. There's a new version available in a Docker registry. And instead of just telling Argo CD, okay, use that new image, it will do that. And then it will also update Git to specify that that's the image that should be used. And so without Git write back, then if your cluster were wiped and you went to do disaster recovery, you would deploy a bunch of old versions of images. And so you would actually not have a source of truth in Git for what should be deployed. With Git write back, that update is done so that Git is always up to
Always
date
the source of
and the
truth.
right source of truth. Yeah.
Okay.
But there was an issue where when it updated resources in customize, it would change the order of the files. And that's actually a problem in customize because if you change the order of the files, it can have implications on like when resources are updated and stuff. So they've that's a community feature. Thank you, Jay, for contributing that has been added. There's another feature where normally when you did an image update, you could only update one image for like a Helm instance, but there might be multiple images that you needed to track, right? Because most often a Helm application is just one set of stuff with one container, but very often a Helm chart will contain multiple services. So to be able to update all those different services, that's a feature that was added and is pretty cool. There's a feature about auto sync. Oh yeah, and multi-source application sets. Gosh, I actually don't even want to get into that one.
I think that what we can do, we can share the link and
put the link out there.
Yeah, and then people can just go ahead and go through. I'm taking control.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Last but not least, for those highlights, Argo rollouts 1.8 release. I'll just mention that this release had 53 contributors and more than a half, to be accurate, 39 were first timers. This is really exciting to me. As a newbie, I know that I can go to that project and start contributing. So it's fantastic. And it includes 202 commits.
Yeah, huge shout out to Zach Aller, who did a heroic effort to review and test and merge so many pull requests into this version of Argo rollouts. Sometimes Argo rollouts doesn't get nearly, it doesn't get nearly as much attention as Argo CD. So sometimes it gets, it doesn't ever get forgotten by my maintainers, but sometimes it's not celebrated as loudly. Let's put it that way. So yeah, definitely really cool to see how many contributors there are. And I know Kostas had some contributions in this one and he's planning to do more in the upcoming version as well. But to be honest, I haven't actually even had a chance to look at the release notes on 1.8. So I don't have a ton of intelligent things to say about it yet.
Well, it's okay. We share the link and people can just go through it. And I'm assuming that we'll do one day session about Argo rollouts. So stay tuned.
Yeah, sounds good.
All righty.